Serious.
That is nothing more dangerous than to build a society with a large segment of people in that society who feel that they have no stake in it, who feel that they have nothing to lose. People who have stake in that society protect that society, but when they don't have it, they unconsciously want to destroy it.
August 1965. Black residents in Watts, a Los Angeles neighborhood, took to the streets in anger. The uprising lasted 6 days and left 34 people dead. Watts was a challenge to the nation and to the nonviolent philosophy of Martin Luther King.
And for the respect of Dr. King that we have here, I say this. Sure, we like to be nonviolent, but we up here in the Los Angeles area, we're not turning that other cheek.
The civil rights movement King led had won a major victory days earlier when President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. But outside the South, little had changed. Anger was building. It was time for King and his staff to move north.
Going to Chicago. Sorry, but I can't take you.
Their first target, Chicago, Illinois, the second largest city in America. A fourth of Chicago's residents were black. Despite a decade of protest and some successes, many faced profound poverty and discrimination.
When I first heard that Dr. King was going to come to Chicago, I was elated. I said, oh my gosh, Chicago's going to get involved in all of this. You know, Dr. King has got a powerful following, a powerful message, and he's going to bring it to Chicago to help with the movement here. He sure needs it.
When we went to Chicago, we were trying to see would nonviolence work in the North and what elements of nonviolence would work. Voter registration, marches and direct action, could we end slums and create good housing, could we create jobs and educational opportunities.
A successful campaign in Chicago might provide a model for combating problems throughout the North. Other cities had been considered, but some black leaders refused to work with King and his staff. Chicago's civil rights leaders welcomed them.
We have looked forward to our coming to Chicago with great and eager anticipation, and as we have said in the past, we are here to study the conditions as they relate themselves in housing, jobs, and the whole school question.
Chicago officials were cautious. Ed Marciniak greeted King on behalf of the city.
That welcome was, I think, both genuine and part of a strategy. The strategy was, here was a man coming to a city he didn't know, to a city whose political institutions with which he was not familiar. He was dealing with people basically who were non-political, suspicious of the political establishment, and so the advice and counsel that he would be getting would be by and large advice that didn't come through the normal political channels.
Chicago was the political dominion of Mayor Richard J. Daley, one of the most powerful men in America. Daley's influence extended into the National Democratic Party.
We love our mayor. Oh, yes, we do.
For 11 years, Daley had run the neighborhoods and city wards of Chicago through a political machine built on patronage. Some blacks were included in the machine, but many saw Daley as the power behind the system that locked them out.
The Daley machine was, well, I guess I could do that best by trying to describe Mayor Daley. He seemed to many to be omnipotent. He took a Machiavelli approach to government.
He was in control, he was strong, demanding, and ruthless.
Daley had blacks on his staff and black officials and some black ministers who marched with Dr. King in the South, went to school with him at Morehouse, but on Daley's plantation, they had press conferences and urged Dr. King to leave Chicago, saying there's no place for you here. It really broke his heart to see some of his classmates turn on him in Chicago.
The mayor himself had supported the campaign for civil rights in the South. Now Daley kept watch as King's organization and local civil rights groups formed the Chicago Freedom Movement. In January 1966, they launched a nonviolent war on slums.
And a lot of people get offended when you say slums, but we have to realize that it's not just something that you can see in a community, it's things that you can't see that make that slum. So we got to do something about these problems, and the only way we can do something about it is to be together, see. And we're going to be together. We're going to get something done here, not only in East Garfield Park, not only in Lawndale, not only in Chicago, but we're going to get things done in New York, California, every state we got, we're going to have something done.
Many of Chicago's black residents were trapped in decaying and segregated neighborhoods. 50 years earlier, those neighborhoods had been the point of entry for Southern blacks recruited to work in northern industries. Other ethnic groups had worked their way out of slums. Strict segregation locked blacks in. Rents were high. Services were neglected.
When I moved into the building on 3400 Madison, it was predominantly white. And when blacks start moving into that building, then it seemed like white people just moved out overnight. They were there. And the services started to go down. He stopped painting, he stopped doing any repairs and things in the building.
What is your name? What's your name?
My name is Mrs. Williams.
Let's get that down.
Yeah, see, we're trying to get some meetings together with the people in this building so we can deal with upstream some of the problems around here.
Well, just a minute, let me come down.
All right, you come on down. Work for Dr. Martin Luther King.
So I sort of made myself an organizer and started talking with the tenants that were in the building about holding their rent. So I got only about 7 of them to say that they would work with me at that particular time. The others I felt that wanted to work with me but were afraid because they were on fixed incomes, particularly public assistance, and they were afraid that the landlord would get their checks cut off.
Opposition to the mayor could be costly. Daley's political machine controlled city services and had influence over public housing and welfare. The mayor used that power against the Chicago Freedom Movement.
He owned that system, Richard J. Daley did. And I remember the inspectors were going from door to door to those of us that were participating with Martin Luther King. And they came to my house. But, you know, people were harassed at that level, inspectors, for violations that they couldn't fix. So when you got a violation, who did you have to go to? You had to go to one of Daley's men to fix the code, or else, you know, you were fined.
When King actually came to town, Daley received him politely, and then every time Dr. King or the movement would raise an issue, Daley would institute some kind of response or program to show that the movement wasn't needed and that the city was on top of the problem. This was particularly true if it had to do with city services. If Dr. King would go to, as he did to the West Side, and help to shovel out the filth in an apartment in a very dirty, rundown section of town, why the next day the garbage trucks would arrive and the place would be all cleaned up. And it is true in the minds of the people and the press, it became hard to see Daley as some kind of enemy because he would always respond.
We'd like to know where places are run down or it's a hazard to human life. The fire department wants to know if a building is in such shape that it's a danger to life of the people that are in it. And they can be of great help in giving us this information.
It was clear, I think, to us at the time that what the Chicago Freedom Movement wanted was a way to get a confrontation with City Hall. And our purpose was to see if we could avoid a confrontation, to diffuse any issue that might precipitate a confrontation. We were not Birmingham, we were not Selma, we were Chicago.
He shall overcome one day. We shall
King had chosen Chicago as the proving ground for a nonviolent campaign in the North. But 6 months had gone by and there were no victories in sight. On July 10th, 1966, the Freedom Movement held a rally at Soldier Field. Some were questioning the strategy of nonviolence. King argued in its defense.
We assemble here today to march to City Hall to demand redress of our legitimate grievances. And I want every one of you here to march with us today. By the thousands, we will march out in a few minutes to make our great witness. I'm still convinced there's nothing more powerful to dramatize and expose the social evil than the tramp of marching feet.
have peace, Lord, Lord, one day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He is in our heart.
In sweltering heat, 5,000 marched with King to City Hall. He taped a list of demands to the door, calling for city action to end discrimination. The following day, movement leaders met with the mayor. The talks reached an impasse.
Well, I asked for their answer to the solution to many of these questions, and they had no solution. They had the recitation of the problem, but I said, well, how do you eliminate the slum and blight overnight? What would you men do that we haven't done in Chicago?
No specific commitments were made. We requested, for instance, a police or a civilian review board. And that again, no commitment was made. In the housing area, no commitments were made. And for this reason, we will have to move right on with our program, our action program, to dramatize these issues and to bring it squarely before not only the attention but the conscience of the Chicago community.
Nowhere to run to, baby. Nowhere to hide. Got nowhere to run to, baby. Nowhere to hide.
A day later, the movement's plans were interrupted. The oppressive July heat had fueled growing tension in the city. When officials closed fire hydrants in a black neighborhood, tempers flared. Leaders of the Freedom Movement mobilized quickly. The future of their nonviolent campaign was at stake.
Dr. King and I and Andy drove around trying to persuade particularly young black people that they were, one, not helping the problem. We understood their frustration. We were trying to address it and find avenues for that energy and frustration and anger to be challenged in a constructive way, and that the most dangerous situation was that the police would overreact and they would in fact be physically hurt or damaged or end up in jail.
The battle on the streets continued for 4 days. 2 people were killed. But Chicago was spared the devastation that had hit Watts a year earlier. Some credited King and the Freedom Movement. Mayor Daley felt otherwise.
The mayor did feel that there was no need for outsiders to stir up the troops in Chicago, and therefore I think his natural inclination was to say, well, we have never had these things before, now they're happening. What's the explanation? It must be these events and these people and the way they're doing things that was responsible for the rioting that took place.
We are trying to conduct a nonviolent movement here in Chicago, and we're going on with that program, but we need support. And there's no point in the power structure and anybody else saying that because we are peacefully going around trying to change conditions that we are the cause of the riots. That's dishonest. It is untrue. It is unfair to say it to the public, because we have stood up for nonviolence with all of our hearts, And those who will make this peaceful revolution impossible will make a violent revolution inevitable. And we've got to get this over. I need help. I need some victories. I need some concessions to take back.
Within days, leaders of the freedom movement shifted focus. They took their protest out of the slums that contained blacks and into the white neighborhoods that excluded them.
There were patterns of segregation and discrimination, clear patterns. For example, there were no signs that said blacks cannot live here, but it was white only. And it was obvious, the white only. And there were reasons why it was white, not because blacks chose not to live in those communities. It's because they were systematically denied, primarily by the real estate agent.
Protesters charged realtors, banks, and insurance companies with blockbusting. White neighborhoods were targeted, homeowners were pressured to sell low and flee, and homes were resold to blacks at a premium. Within months, areas were changed from all white to all black, and city and financial services decreased.
The white people didn't make money, the black people didn't make money, the real estates make money, and they do it because of that. They can move the blacks into middle-class white neighborhoods, they can move the whites out of middle-class neighborhoods into the suburbs. They make the money, we don't make anything, but they propagate the idea that because blacks move into white neighborhoods, your house values are going to go down.
Freedom movement volunteers crossed the line that divided black and white Chicago. They began marching into all white neighborhoods.
This neighborhood was convinced that we were there to take away their most precious possession, their homes, and the beauty of their neighborhood. And as we walked deeper and deeper into the neighborhood, you had a great sense of isolation. Would I ever get out of here? And the expressions of anger and hate, the swastikas which were held up, just unbelievable. And it showed the problem. That's all the point was, to show the problem, to show the fear, to show the rejection, to show the hate, to show the problem that we were trying to solve.
And it was said that you could not expose segregation in the North because it was subtle. The fact is, it was everything except subtle. It was dynamic, it was real, blatant, ugly, violent.
So I was hit 3 times. Were any of your other people hit? I don't know. How many of your people were arrested? I don't know.
Three days of marching exposed white resistance and heightened black skepticism about the use of nonviolence.
I was sick that Sunday, but when I watched it on TV, I got angry, I got sad, I got upset. You know, when I watched that kind of hostility and that kind of prejudice that I did not understand, so I just couldn't see why they would do that. And looking at that, I said, gee, I'm not as nonviolent as I think I am, especially when Dr. King wanted us to be nonviolent. Because if I had been there and they had threw those rotten eggs and they spit on me, I think I would have just hit back.
We sent Negroes in large numbers to the real estate offices in Gage Park. Every time Negroes went in, the real estate agent said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have anything listed. Now, you can find something somewhere else, and it was always back in the ghetto, but they didn't have anything. And then soon after that, we sent some of our fine white staff members into those same real estate offices, and the minute the white persons got in, they opened the book. Oh, yes, well, we have several things. Now, what exactly do you want?
On August 5th, the marchers returned to the southwest side. Mayor Daley had sent 1,200 police officers. They estimated the mob at 5,000.
to the front from the back of the bus. Any jokers trying to take us back, what type of rap is that?
Burk9.com.